Well, guys, it's great to visit with you. We've got a good roundtable today. Russell Kuhlman from the Nevada Wildlife Federation, and then our old friend Charles Whitwam, and a new friend Everett Headley from Howl. It's great to have all of you guys here. Thanks for making time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us on.
It was my pleasure. So, our listeners are probably familiar with Howl at this point, as Charles has been on the show multiple times. And I've encouraged you guys, if you're not already following their social media stuff, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Make sure you take care of that. Not really familiar with Russell. So you've got the Nevada Wildlife Federation cap on. I see a nice whitetail and a fox, a red fox, full body mount there in the background. I approve of all of these good things. What do you do, Russell?
Yeah, so my elevator pitch, I guess, is I originally grew up back east where the whitetail and red fox came from, but I've been hunting, we'll say, for a long time, and currently live in Reno, Nevada, and work as the executive director for the Nevada Wildlife Federation, which is a affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation, which some of you may have heard of. But really here in Nevada, our main issues is dealing with public access and making sure that Nevada's wildlife and habitat are hopefully trending in the right direction. And currently they are not, for a multitude of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into in the next hour or so, but really just trying to be the voice for a healthy Nevada wildlife and habitat.
So what are my options as a non-resident? Nevada, and I don't remember why, but when I was selecting all the states I'm going to build points in out west, I threw Nevada and Arizona into the scrap heap and was like, no. In Arizona, it was because I had to buy a $300 license every year just to apply. And then I was like, oh, and then it's going to take me 25 years to draw the damn tag. And I was just like, I'll just do it the other way. Or if I want to spend that much money, I'll just go on an outfitted hunt. Like, plus I'll be 60 something years old when I draw the stupid tag. Who knows if I'll even be able to hack it in the backcountry at that point. What are my options as a non-resident for hunting big game in Nevada, first of all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first, if you're going to apply for Nevada as a non-resident, which I've done for a handful of years before I moved here, you gotta kind of put it in that category of the long game. You're not going to hunt Nevada every year as a non-resident for big game. Yeah, if you want to chase chukar or quail or Himalayan snowcock in the rubies, you probably could, but all those hunts are certainly not guaranteed as far as success either. But we give out more non-resident desert sheep tags than any other state. So for those diehard sheep hunters, Nevada definitely should be on the list. But again, I probably won't draw in the next 20 years as a resident. So everything is definitely the long vision. But we actually have an increasing elk population. Still super hard tag to get, but some of the biggest elk in the West, some of them are hiding here in Nevada. And then if you do want to go guided, which I did back in 2019 as a non-resident for mule deer, your odds increase significantly if you kind of join that guided pool for mule deer here in the state. Admittedly, just like every other state, our mule deer population's kind of going down in terms of quality, but there's still some monsters lurking out here.
So you think about these states where it might take you 20 years to draw in a trophy bull unit, or it's going to take longer than that for sheep. Like you said, you might not draw in the next 20 years. I don't even know how many points you have. I don't think I'm looking at our faces here. Some are younger than others, but I'm going to say late 30s to 50. I don't know. Charles maybe is on the bringing up the rear there. I don't know.
46.
Okay, I'm 41, and I'm thinking we're all like 15 years too late to this party for the before it, because I'm talking about supply and demand, right? That was before it really became you're gonna have to wait 25 years to draw situation. And on the sheep, I think that numbers just keeps going up. So I wish when I was 15 years old, I would have started applying for these things, but I had no idea I even liked it at 15 years old,
Yeah, and you're right. And NDOW, the Nevada Department of Wildlife, just conducted our draw I think earlier today, and they said that they had a record number of applicants. I think we got over 85,000 applicants in the state this year, which is the highest they've ever been. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. I wish I could have to go back 15 years ago and started applying for sure,
Right.
just like everyone else. But I think the secret's definitely out here in Nevada. If you want a good quality animal and willing to wait a couple of years, certainly the state to do it in, but agreed that, we are the driest state in the union. So we don't have all of the extra moisture and rain like some other states that can, produce animals that allow a non-resident to hunt every year.
You can still come to Las Vegas and see Fremont Street, which is cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could come to Las Vegas and go to the Desert National Wildlife Refuge just north, which was the source population for a lot of Western states' sheep right now. That was designated back in 1937 by Roosevelt as the last sanctuary for desert sheep. And I was just there last weekend and saw some ewes up there. No big rams, but they're certainly out there.
Well, so Charles, you had mentioned before we started recording that you just got off of a virtual meeting, or what were you? It was like with the I don't know, what is it, Nevada Fish and Game or Nevada Fish and Wildlife or whatever your state agency is called, but I think it was something with this bill that we're going to talk about today, SB 90. What were you doing?
It was in the legislative committee was discussing this bill, and they had testimony on both sides. That happened yesterday.
Okay.
So I was like, I should watch this and see what happened. I made it through the proponents of the bill. I didn't get to the opposition, but I believe Russell said he watched the whole thing, so he could probably give an update on. I don't know if they had a vote or if I'm not sure exactly what happened, but that's what I've been doing for the last hour. And just listening to the proponent's testimony was interesting to me, which we can get into, but maybe Russell can let us know, was there a vote at the end, or are they moving this on, or what's going on?
Russell, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No to both of those. I think thankfully they did not vote on it, and they're not moving it forward. Basically, what the Senate Natural Resource Committee did was just hold a public hearing to educate both the public and those decision makers on that committee. So it was just heard. Both sides were given opportunities to voice their concern, and they have until Friday to move it. And if nothing happens to this bill by Friday, it's effectively dead.
Woohoo! Yeah. So Everett, let's give you the floor here, because you wrote the call to action for Howl, which is how I found out about this bill. And I read that thing and my blood started boiling, and it took me back to cougar hunting in Colorado, and we're on BLM land, and I'm on a mule. And as the outfitter called me, he's like, "No, you're from Texas, buddy, but you're a dude unless you've ridden a horse a lot." And he's like, I was like, "No, I haven't. I've ridden horses in my life." But he's like, "Okay, then I'm putting you on a mule, because the mule is going to be way steadier and less nervous, not as nervous as one of these horses." And so he puts me on a mule, and I think it was this wild stallion comes up. I'm like, first of all, I saw these horse feces just everywhere, and then you start looking, and the browse is like starting like destroyed. And he's like, "Oh, it's these damn horses. The state won't let us do anything with them. They just run roughshod all over the BLM." And then this stallion starts, it's I think it's sizing up his mare is what it's doing, making everybody and the horses uncomfortable. And it wasn't afraid of people, obviously. So it was just a bad situation all the way around. And so now I'm reading this article, and I'm like, this really started to piss me off. So with that being said, Everett, walk us through exactly what SB 90 is.
Yeah, if you followed Western conservation for a handful of years, wild horses are not and let me say, feral horses, not wild horses. And I don't know if we want to get into that distinction. Maybe I'll kick that back over to Russell for some education for us. But if you've been following the drought that's happening out west, and how all the ungulates are having problems with finding feed and water. I mean, everybody's just kind of suffering, right?
Mhm.
And then you add into the equation what feral horses and burros are doing in Nevada. It's a catastrophe, and it's really at a tipping point, right? We have so many of them. We can't keep up with the population through adoption, through taking them off range and corralling them, and you know, the latest statistics are telling us that every 4 years that horse population is doubling. And the other stat that kind of comes to mind is that these horses and burros, they're eating over twice the forage that all the other wild animals eat combined. So the picture that we're painting is just this bleak, denuded landscape. And if you've ever been to
In the
Nevada,
driest state in the country.
yeah, it already looks like, you know, no offense, Russell, but there's places that kind of look like the lunar landscape, right? And so if you look at the graphs and the pictures and everything, and you see just how far we have come with the loss of habitat, and mainly due to these wild or feral animals, there should be a call to action, right? So I'm glad to hear that when you read the SB 90 call to action that I wrote for Howl, it made your blood boil, you said, and that's kind of the action that I'm wanting to get, right? I give you the facts, I give you the situation, and I'm not trying to paint it one way or the other. This is simply what's going on, right? And then we have a bill that comes forward, and what it wants to do is celebrate the presence of the wild horse. I'm sorry, the wild Mustang as the state horse. But nowhere in this bill is there any mention, consideration, or thought given to the ecological impact that these animals are having and the negative trends that we're starting to see that we're tying directly back to feral horses and burros. And so it's a bill that really kind of it doesn't think about everything else that's happening. It's really emotion based, right? So you get this Disney-esque kind of mentality going on, right? Like, here's this beautiful stallion, you see the movies, you want to, you know, put some kind of pedestal out there to, you know, look at our horses, they're so pretty, but there's nothing that understands what's going on the backside. And so when we put the action together, we really wanted to make sure people knew that there's a real negative side to what's going on here that's not even being thought of. It's not in the bill. And if we were to pass this, it would gloss over everything else that's going on. And so future management of these horses would just become that much more difficult if we were to pass SB 90. So
Do any of y'all have like elementary aged kiddos?
No.
Not anymore.
Russell, you?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Do you have kids?
I do not. I got 2 dogs running around. That's why I had to go off.
Well, I can tell you from experience that the kids are still using glue in school. So, I mean, I have a solution for the problem, but nobody wants to acknowledge what this, you know, the solution would be. But the horses just need to be killed. I'm not saying all of them, but you can't. It's like take your pick. Botswana has 150,000 elephants. That's 75,000 over their carrying capacity. Well, it's the same thing. They're destroying the browse. They're eating themselves out of house and home. Oh, and by the way, the animals that drive conservation funding, mule deer, elk tags, sheep tags, are suffering because these horses are getting a free pass. No, and I don't know if in 2023 there's any way we could convince people to let us go in there and shoot these things out of a helicopter, but that's what needs to happen. And it reminds me, Charles, of the same thing we've talked about with this bill, specifically from what you just outlined, Everett. It doesn't sound like there's any recourse for management. It's just when you make something the state bird or fish, or in this case, horse, whatever, you protect it. And that means across the board, no killing of it. It reminds me of the initial plan for wolf reintroduction in Colorado, which we've been fighting tooth and nail. It's like, okay, well, we're fine. Now you voted, you morons voted to reintroduce these things. Okay, that cat's out of the bag. Now we have to have an actual piece of legislation that when the time comes, when we reach the quota, or whatever it is the goal is, the management goal, then now we can manage these things.
Yeah. And yeah, just to kind of add in some background information as well. SB 90 was officially introduced by a group of 4th graders
Ah.
And I'm pretty confident they don't have any knowledge of this issue. And there was, we'll say, some maybe wild horse advocate organizations that helped them guide the drafting of that bill, and certainly paid for the lobby fees. But it was pretty clear the
leftist propaganda. Get some kids in here and have them be the face of the whole movement.
Yeah, and they've been using that playbook since day one. Is let's rule wildlife management with emotion and not science. And listening and watching that hearing yesterday, it was a pretty thin veil of exactly that's what they were trying to do. And it was good that, the opposition, called them out on that for exactly what you said. This has nothing to do with wildlife management or making sure the horses are safe. They're going to use this as saying, look, Nevada voted to make this the state animal, and we shouldn't allow one horse off the landscape. And they're going to use it as an extra buffer to impede the BLM or any other agency land managing to remove those horses, because they're always going to fall back on this SB 90 and say this is what Nevadans wanted, when realistically, that's not the case.
100%. Yeah. So watching that today, I only watched the proponents, and a lot of the organizations were certainly the horse advocates. And
any of the ones that we are familiar with, maybe not on the horse advocacy, was like Sierra Club or Center for Biological Diversity.
So no, I'll touch on that, but no, not Sierra Club, but it was like the Wild Horse. I don't know what their acronyms are. But what's actually interesting about the Center for Biological Diversity is we've been, I think we're probably 3 actions in now for feral horses in Arizona. And Robin Silver, who is the president of the CBD, is for removing the horses. And I've actually gotten, it's crazy, but most of the information and the pictures that I get are from him, from the CBD, which is crazy because they understand the habitat loss that these horses are causing. I think with them, it's oh God, what animal is it? It's not the trout. Well, I don't know. It's one of the animals that they're super concerned with, but they're recognizing that the horses are basically causing this other animal to go extinct, and plus the habitat loss. So the CBD is an interesting one with this whole.
That's encouraging. I mean, I'm going to give them basically zero credit across the board, but that's interesting because at the same time, you would think that an organization like that would be like, well, if the horses destroy the habitat, then we can do away with hunting. So maybe they actually do care about the environment, unlike PETA or HSUS, where their end game is end hunting at all costs.
Well, Robin lives there in Arizona and he sees it firsthand, so maybe that has something to do with it. I do know there has been some internal shakeups with CBD because of the stance that they've taken, but just an interesting tidbit there on the CBD because I don't think we agree with them on anything else.
Right.
And when I first found out, I was like, wait, this is the CBD, like the CBD, the Center for like this is where we're getting our information from them. Wow. And it's backed up with 23 other hunting organizations in Arizona who are actually on this, working in collaboration in a sense with the CBD, which is interesting. But it's this. So what a lot of people are saying in Nevada on this are, oh, we have, our relatives come in and they want to see the horses, and then they go to Lake Tahoe and then they gamble. And we have Asian Airlines is going to set up a thing just to fly in people because they want to see the horses. And then you have people, one lady, she said, we have no skin in the game here. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You have no skin in the game. That's an interesting statement. I don't think she realized what she was saying, but what they were saying was, we like to go see the horses. Oh, they're so beautiful. Let's take pictures and then let's go gamble. That's it. They're not looking at the habitat. They don't even care. They don't even know what habitat is. Going out there and seeing the trout that's that's being affected by this, or the habitat for sheep or elk or mule deer or any of that. And so it's just interesting. It did remind me of the ballot box initiative where Coloradans were like, yeah, let's have wolves here. Who doesn't want to see wolves? They're cool.
Those people that
They're
voted in
awesome.
favor, well, they'll never see a wolf.
They'll
They
never
live in
see 'em,
Boulder
no.
and Denver, and they will never see one.
Yeah, and it's just, it really is an emotional vote with, and that's about as far as it gets, is just it's just emotion, and it's not very deep whatsoever. But again, on its face, all right, it's the state animal. One of the legislators was like, I don't really care if you want to call it the state animal or not. That's fine. I don't care. But we do need to focus on, this is going to raise it on an emotional level to an iconic species. More than it already is. I mean, it's already on, I think, a coin there. I mean, it's on everything in Nevada, but now it's going to be a state horse. And you just know that's going to make it way harder for any removal of horses in the future. And the groups who were there, the horse advocate groups who were there, they're using words like trophy hunting. And I'm just going, okay, yeah, I know. Yeah, you've already lost me. Because you're going down the same road. Like, I know where you're going to go if you get this bill. I know what you're going to say if you get this bill. And real quick, just like how we did this, the way I like to do any action is I want to know if the bill has any legs at all. Like, I don't want to waste people's times because there's thousands of bills out there, and we could act like the sky is falling on every bill just to get support or whatever. And so I reached out to Everett. I'm like, man, I don't have any partners at all in Nevada. I don't really know anybody there. Do you know anybody? And like the next day he was like, yeah, I made some contacts. And then, so that's how Everett found Russell. This is actually my first time talking to Russell or seeing him, because Everett just handled it all. And I'm like, I just need to know if it's an important issue, because people are hitting me up on it, but should we get involved? And it came back where, yeah, we should. So then that's where we pulled the trigger on this. It's kind of how we did this.
And Everett, where do you live?
The best state in the union, man, Montana.
So, I mean, I already outlined my experience with Colorado and those damn wild horses. Does Montana have an issue with this? I mean, it's not unique to Nevada. They probably have the worst case scenario, but there are other Western states that are dealing with this. And I had an interview with someone, I don't know, it was a handful of years ago, and we looked at the overall number of wild horses on like public land, BLM, National Forest, whatever. And a lot of them, like you said, have been taken to non-kill facilities, which the amount of taxpayer dollars we're spending on these stupid horses to live in a taxpayer funded non-kill facility is astronomical. It's just, none of it makes any sense. And it's just because they're a horse, and much like a dog, we can't do anything. We can't say we're going to kill the horses, but I don't know.
Montana, we have a few hundred, I think, wild horses. They're not a big deal. They're really small populations where they are. And so it doesn't crop up on our radar really. But across the West, you do, especially as you go further south, you have more animals across the landscape. And kind of answering your question you asked earlier, which is what do we kind of do? Until we get sportsmen engaged, informed, and involved, we're going to continue to have this problem, right? Because horses are they're charismatic megafauna, just like grizzly bears are. And you've ever heard a biologist talk about the eyelash idea behind animals. The longer the eyelashes are, the more cuddly they are, the less likely there's going to be any action on them, right? And so we really got to have an education effort that starts with sportsmen, and we begin to understand the situation it is dire, and we're at a precipice where if we continue down this road, we're going to lose desert bighorns, elk, other species that really need the landscape that are already hurting, right? And so when you start to frame it in terms of not only do we have too many horses, but we have them in a way that if you like the hunting that you have in Nevada, you really need to understand that it's being eroded by the populations. And it's not just Nevada, right? It's other states that have this same feral horse problem. So what we do at Howl is so vital because we give you education, right? When I write my actions, I put links on there. And so if you want to dive deeper into this, here's a YouTube video. Here's the actual law. Here are, like we've got Russell's letter to the editor, things like that, so that you can go and educate yourself. But if we don't have sportsmen stepping up to do what we're doing here, we're not going to win the battle, right?
How many horses are we talking about, Russell? First of all, and then second part of this question is donkeys get lumped into this thing too. And now if they were to protect the horse, make it the state, animal or whatever, they're not going to say, but also we have to make the donkey the state animal. So can we kill the donkeys at least? Like, I mean, I keep going back to killing them because that's the only thing that makes sense realistically, but nobody, I don't even, like I said, I don't think that's even realistic in 2023. The backlash is going to be astronomical, but let's go around in a circle and we come back to the same answer. There's too many horses. It's costing taxpayers too much money. There's a logical solution.
Yeah, and I should probably flag that kind of early on to give your listeners a frame of reference. So Nevada is home to about 2/3 of the entire West's feral horse and burro population. So we're pretty much, definitely the leader in that. And, back in the 70s, the 80s, when we weren't in a horrible drought, the land could support, using the best science, roughly anywhere from 11 to 13,000 horses on the landscape. And that number made sure that other native wildlife like deer, antelope, bighorn sheep, elk could also live without too much competition. The last aerial surveys that the BLM and NDOW have done have ballparked it anywhere from 50,000 to 60,000 horses. So, on the landscape during some of the best decades of moisture and rain, the scientists said, 13,000 max horses. Now, we're hitting the national news for how bad our drought is. Lake Mead's, revealing dead bodies since the 70s. And we have 50,000 horses on the landscape. And so, yeah, I mean, you could probably go out there with a helicopter and remove as many as possible, and you still wouldn't make a dent because, as Everett mentioned earlier, it can double its population in 4 years. And, running around with a dart gun trying to dart 50,000 horses is not only impossible from a financial standpoint, but you're just never going to get them all. And so, I mean, that's the issue that we're dealing with right now. With just there being too many horses on the landscape.
So you took us back to the answer without saying it, is that really killing them is the only viable solution.
Yeah, I mean, lethal removal is definitely a tool I think we wish we all had, but this all got started with Congress in 1971 passing the Wild Horse and Burro Act, which pretty much outlines you can't kill them, and so it's going to take an act of Congress.
That's a federal law?
Yeah.
Oh wow. So I guess I didn't know that, but it makes sense.
But I think, and Russell, I think there's a threshold though, right? Because they're saying, so throughout all this conversation, they're saying that the feds aren't doing their job. That they're admitting, so I think they are just for the show. But they're saying there are too many horses, and yeah, we are trying to dart them and all that. But the feds aren't doing their job on the BLM. So what does that mean? Is there an option to get to kill them, or no? You cannot kill them whatsoever? Because I've heard both sides of that.
Reading the Wild Horse and Burro Act, I don't think the federal or state agencies can kill them. I think any horses that are being, sent to slaughter or anything like that are kind of being done through a loophole that, a lot of people are trying to close as well.
Let's open that bad boy up.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the loopholes is the government will actually pay you $1,000 if you adopt these horses and keep them for a year. So what people were doing were adopting them, keeping them in a pasture, getting their $1,000, and then shipping them to Mexico and Canada for slaughterhouses. And so that's one of the loopholes, and that's one of the conspiracy theories that you hear. They're sending them to slaughterhouses. The agencies aren't. It's people trying to work a way around that. And I do want to mention
but that
this
solves
too.
part of the problem. If they're getting rid of the horses, great. And
Yeah,
they're getting
I mean,
$1,000.
Yeah, not something you want to tout, but any horses removed from the landscape because of their overpopulation, certainly I don't think is going to be a huge negative impact. But just to kind of give everyone a sense of what we're up against, you mentioned Sierra Club and CBD, and in my opinion, they don't hold a candle to the organization and fundraising that some of these wild horse and burro advocates are on. They're on a whole different level, and they have certainly cracked the secret of mixing emotion with fundraising and how to get as many lobbyists on a team as possible without actually doing anything other than putting up hurdles for the federal agencies to get the work done. And that's a big problem that we're trying to face is, the BLM does have the tools. Yes, it's probably going to be expensive to have all these horse roundups, but these wild horse and burro advocates will put up any roadblock if they can and tie up things in the court for as long as possible to make sure the actions on the ground aren't taking place in order to remove those horses. So we're not, essentially playing with a bunch of mom and pop organizers. These are very well organized and very well, I don't want to say informed, because a lot of their information, in my opinion, is very much misinformation. But they have a strategy and they know how to play it for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing that's become painfully obvious. For me, I've battled on the air against the ideals of PETA and HSUS and CBD for 15 years. But then when Texans for Mountain Lion showed up in my lap this past summer, that was the first time I realized firsthand how well funded and organized these groups are. Way more than us, the opposition, like we're always reacting. So that's why Howl, Sportsman's Alliance, SCI, I think keeping up with all of their call to actions, all of their press releases is so important, so that we're not always on our heels and we know what's coming. Because for far too long, us sportsmen as a community have just reacted to whatever they threw at us, and we were unprepared for it. So I'm glad to hear that SB 90, based off of what you said, probably is going to die in committee.
Yeah, I'm certainly still knocking on wood for that statement, but I do want to flag the great work that Howl does as well, because in that hearing yesterday, some of those decision makers on that committee flagged how much comments they got in opposition of this bill, and I think Howl was responsible for the vast majority of organizing those comments, because a lot of these rural decision makers, don't want to see the horse become this ultra protected species, because they're dealing with ranchers and public land users, and you have to hear firsthand. And even they said they're getting emails from their constituents that 75% are in opposition of this bill. So comment collection is definitely a super important process of everything. In my perfect world, I wish wildlife management could go nowhere near a voting machine or state legislation, but that's not the world we live in. And so I think, as hunters, our best option is to, gather our voices to submit our opinions. And a lot of, we're one of the few users on the landscape that have boots on the ground almost year round, especially in the fall. And I guarantee you, we're seeing a lot more firsthand of what's happening on our landscape than some of these other people are.
So let me ask you, I come from a state that's 98% privately owned. I don't know what Nevada's breakdown is of the private landowner versus federal or state owned land. What happens when these horses get on your property though? Like, do you have any recourse of, if it was a feral hog in Texas, we just shoot the damn thing. Like, obviously you can't do that there. So you call the state and be like, hey, you need to come get these horses off, or you try to drive them off yourself? What are you supposed to do? Because it's their problem, really. They're dumping it now into your lap. because of their mismanagement.
Yep. And so Nevada is actually almost the inverse of Texas. We're 86% public land, and 65% of that is just Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. But to kind of go back to your question, if a horse goes onto your land, the state's going to say, don't touch it. They're one of the most federally protected outside of an endangered species that you can get. And that's what's so frustrating, is because the states have proven time and time again that they're able to manage the state's wildlife on behalf of citizens, but they can't do anything with this overpopulation of horses because of a law that was passed in 1971 that essentially says, you harm it or harass it, you're going to jail. And there's been, reports of people shooting horses, and the next day these wild horse advocates will have a reward for $20,000 for any information leading up to it.
Oh wow.
So they are probably the most protected invasive species that I can imagine.
It's just criminal. And we deal with our feral hog problem appropriately here, but again, people are going to think that I hate horses, like after listening to this, but I don't. I mean, horses are great, but they're just like feral hogs in this situation. They don't belong there. They're not a part of the landscape. So why are we treating them, putting them on this pedestal? Is beyond me.
Right. And then, real quick, I think it's important to say, like, everyone who is involved here in Nevada, as far as organizations on the opposite end here, we don't want to remove every single last horse. All we're trying to do is manage them like we do our wildlife, and bring them down to an acceptable level where they can live on the landscape in partnership with everything else that we cherish and wild animals go. But I think that if I had to ask these horse groups one question, it would be, when is there enough horses on the landscape? Because at some point it's going to be nothing but horses and burros on the landscape, and we're not going to have sheep, deer, elk, antelope on the landscape, and it's just going to be horses. And if I drew a horse tag, I'd be the first one out there cutting it up and eating it. But that's the blaring question I definitely want to ask is, when there is enough. And during that hearing, the argument they tried to make is horses are native to the United States. And a great rebuttal I heard on the opposing side was from a Native American here in Nevada that said, you can look at every rock here in the state and you're never going to find a picture of a horse. So don't keep saying it's native.
Well, guess what? Pheasants aren't native. We manage them. That red fox back there, I don't think they're originally native to the United States. I think they came from Europe or something like that.
Yeah. We have chukar. We have one of the best chukar hunting states here, and those came from Pakistan. And we have the Himalayan snowcock in the Ruby Mountains, which certainly didn't come anywhere. It's the only place you can hunt those. So, you talk about controversial animals, Colorado and Montana and Idaho, they're all dealing with wolves, and, essentially not Colorado yet, but, we'll be managing those as well. But, because of that 1971 Horse and Burro Act, horses have this untouchable creed on them now that you can't go near them.
Well, Charles, I appreciate you putting this together, man, as always. Everett, thanks for writing up the call to action. Enjoyed reading that. Thanks for keeping us informed. And Russell, thanks for giving us the firsthand account of what is going on in Nevada regarding you said 50,000 wild horses and burros on a landscape that can support maximum 13,000. That's insanity. So
I think it's 60, right?
60,000.
Yeah, I was just kind of being conservative on that number. But yeah, I've heard anywhere from 40 to 60,000, but certainly more than 13. And, I can say our mule deer certainly aren't over 4 times what need to be, and neither are antelope bighorn sheep and elk. And I would argue, I don't have the facts to support it, but I would pretty much be confident in saying that, you know, those big game animals bring in a lot more money for the state than someone having to drive to Carson City just to see a horse and then fly out. But
Right.
I don't know what the thinking is behind that.
Yeah, you'd still be able to see them, you know, even if the numbers are reduced, they're going to remain there, but something needs to be done. I do think at a certain point, because what's going on in Arizona at a pretty extreme level, and of course Nevada, that this bill needs to be revisited, because it's going to get out of control.
The
And
one from 1971.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think visuals are really important. And Cable, I didn't know this until right now because I was looking up the name of it, but it's on the action. It's called Horse Rich and Dirt Poor. It's by Fin and Fur Films, who your best friend Ben Masters is a part of. But I didn't realize it. I don't think he's in the video. But it's a really good video, just like 15 minutes long, that just shows visuals of here's where there's horses, and then here's a fence, and here's what the habitat would look like if there weren't any horses. And they go into the trout. What's the name of the trout?
The Lahontan.
Yeah. They go into the effects that it's having on the trout and of course other wildlife around it. But you can see it's, I think, you know, just super important. You can really see the effects that all these horses are having. And when I mean all these horses, they're going to a canyon and there's like hundreds of horses just coming out of this canyon. You're like, oh my God, they're just everywhere. And so I think everybody should watch that. I think it adds to the severity of this case.
I have one more question for Russell, and I don't know if you have this information handy, but what would you say is Nevada's elk population? What is their mule deer population? And what is their sheep population? I'd be willing to bet that if you combine all of them, it's close to 60,000. Like, I don't know. It maybe is a little more, but I doubt you have 60,000 elk.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you there. And yeah, I don't have those numbers.
You damn sure don't have 60,000 sheep. You probably have a couple thousand, like.
Right. But I mean, I don't have those exact numbers, but what I can tell you is this year, sorry if you hear my dog barking, the Nevada Department of Wildlife reduced their mule deer tags by 40% across the board. And they even cut 43% from the junior tags. So our mule deer population is just falling off the cliff fast. Our elk populations, I would say, holding steady to slightly increasing. So that's good. It's certainly not doubling itself every 4 years like the wild horses. And then, yeah, our antelope and bighorn sheep are, at best maintaining, if not going down slightly because of the drought. And, horses do not get along well with those species. When horses go to a watering hole, they kick everybody else out. And study and science has shown that time and time again, where, antelope are more vigilant when horses are present. Mule deer get kicked out, and even elk can't compete with a group of horses when it comes to water. And so they really are the big bad bullies on the landscape and are negatively affecting the native wildlife.
Well, there needs to be a precedent set, and I don't know if Nevada will be able to do anything about it, but just darting them and removing them, like you said, financially, it's just not feasible. So we keep going back to what Charles just said about reversing that law. Like, there's lethal removal needs to be considered. I just can't wrap my head around any other solution. And people don't want to hear it, right? Like,
yeah, the horses that are going to the holding centers also, I forget, it's in the millions of dollars that's coming out of taxpayer money to just feed these horses, which then now are they wild anymore? I mean, it's crazy. They're in Arizona. I don't know if there's a situation in Nevada, Russell, but in Arizona, they've been able to differentiate some of the horses as actually feral horses and then wild horses. So they actually can, because what happened is there's wildfires, horses got off of an Indian reservation, so they weren't wild. And now they're living in certain areas in Arizona, and they've traced it back like, all right, these aren't the wild horses that are protected under the Wild Horse Act. These are just escaped horses. They are truly feral in that definition of how they're looking at it. Is there a situation like that in Nevada? Or are they all, is it, or no?
Yeah, I don't think there is. But I also believe that's, it's one of the easy rabbit holes to go down without really getting to the core of the situation is, this discussion of, what should we call these horses? At the end of the day, there's just whatever they are, there's too many on the landscape and need to be removed. And I've heard of every excuse from the wild horse and burro advocates, on, why there isn't technically enough horses on the landscape, and none of them have been based in science. And, I personally just call them non-native because that's the position I can defend pretty aggressively with science. But, certainly whatever they are, they need to be reduced by 2/3.
No doubt. Well, guys, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks to each one of you for making time for us today. And today it's Nevada. Next year it might be Arizona or Colorado or, name the Western state. It's affecting all of them. Montana, Everett, you said you guys only have a couple hundred. Give it a couple years. If they're multiplying 4x every year, you're going to have a problem on your hands too. So going back to just saying how proactive we have started to become as a hunting community. I wouldn't just say, 200, no big deal. I don't know. Seems like that could very easily spiral out of control. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the time today. And Russell, again, thanks for writing the call to action, and Charles for doing the research on whether it was something that had legs or not. We certainly appreciate that as well.
Yeah. Everett was the one who did the call to action. I just kind of supplied the background info. But, the one thing I do want to leave everyone with is, now is more important than ever to have hunters get engaged in these type of legislative processes. And big shout out to Howl for really kickstarting all of that and bringing everything that we are concerned about to light. Because like I said, I don't think wildlife management has any place in the voting machine. But that's where we are. And so as hunters, we need to start being engaged in this.
Yeah, no doubt. Charles, quick question. This is a conversation for another day, but since we have you here, have you heard of Wildlife for All coming out of New Mexico?
Oh yeah. I've quite a bit. The beginning probably in Washington State. They're kind of behind one of their arms, Washingtonians for Wildlife. I don't know, but they're basically an arm of Wildlife for All, and the whole recommissioning, that whole thing that they have. I
think that's going to be our next big thing that we're going to have to fight is Wildlife for All, and the mentality of just rewilding and taking hunters and sportsmen out of the equation from wildlife management. And I was talking with Gabriella Huffman of the District of Conservation podcast recently, and she brought that organization up. And then I told her kind of a disturbing message I got on Instagram from a student at Virginia Tech, and the head of the department there, the senior class, was saying that, hey, on the university level, we're going to move away from teaching that sportsmen are vital in the management process and start making it they use the word inclusive. It's got to be a more inclusive deal, diversity, equity, inclusion. We got to have that in wildlife management now. So I don't think those things are unique. I think they're connected, and I think we're going to be dealing a lot more with that moving forward.
Yeah, they say they want to democratize wildlife management. Let's just use a different, put this in a different field. Let's democratize brain surgery. Let's bring that to the polls. And the public should vote on what the best practices are for brain surgery, because we know so much about it.
Right.
We honestly have to look at this the same way. And it's nothing but, at the end of the day, it's nothing but a giant money-making machine, because that's what they're really good at, and they're really good at messaging and convincing people to think their way and persuading.
Unlike our money-making machine, which funds conservation, theirs just exists to sue state and federal wildlife agencies.
Yeah,
They don't give anything back.
but it's a real call to action on our part. Like, we have to do, we're decades behind, and there's nothing we can do to change that, but we got to do something major. I mean, major, to reach the people that we need to stop reaching hunters, stop caring about that. You know, we can get more of those people involved. We need to reach the non-hunting public with our side of the argument. That's what they're so good at. And yeah, Wildlife for All is, you got people sitting on their advisory board who just, well, now it's a year and a half ago, were commissioners on Washington State's Wildlife Commission. Now they're on their advisory board. And then Colorado just hired a new director who came from Washington State, who Wildlife for All is supporting. They're very strategic. They're very smart. They're trying to do this in a lot of states and get a foothold in those states.
And in the university system, like for that, and I'm going to have that guy on in June. I'm going to interview him and say, hey, why? I'm not going to throw his student's name out there and be like, this is what your student told me.
Yeah.
And, you know, why are we moving in this direction as college professors in the university system, saying that hunting really going forward into the future has no place in wildlife management? Like, how do you justify that? But that's the, you know, that's the thing. And fewer of those students that are pursuing those degrees are actually hunters and anglers. They're doing it from a place of, oh yeah, let's save the wildlife. Okay, well then let us do our job as sportsmen and sportswomen, because we're damn good at it if you just leave us alone.
I know you're trying to wrap us up, Cable, but I had a conversation with the director of the wildlife program at the University of Montana here in Missoula, and they have a class that is dedicated to the idea of hunting is conservation, and it's a vital part of wildlife management. And Delta Waterfowl has a program that they work with a lot of different universities to bring experiences to these students who they're urbanized and they've never had their own hunting experiences, and so they take them on the first hunt, right? And I've worked with them on Canada geese hunts, and so just trying to give them that positive exposure to hunting and show them that it's a vital tool. So there's a handful of chairs that the Boone and Crockett Club, they have funded in these universities, and they're really working with these wildlife students to help them see that part. So hopefully that'll combat maybe a little bit what's going on over there in Virginia.
It's encouraging for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, good stuff today, my friends. Thank you guys, Russell, Everett, Charles. Appreciate each one of you, and yeah, very important stuff. So thanks for making time.
Thanks, Gabe.
All right, take care.